Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Likvidi podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Monty Bryant, who happens to be one of the co-founders of ReFi DAO. In a few words, ReFi DAO is a founder-led startup community on a mission to accelerate impact for people and the planet, which is quite the mission, I would say. But that being said, Monty, I think it would be suitable to start with a little intro about your background, and it will be also fascinating to gauge how you went about the founding of this venture of yours.
Yeah, so just to clarify, I founded People Power coming out of university, and then kind of merged my work into ReFi DAO with John Ellison, all of the awesome work that he's doing. And there's a small team of us now but yeah, so that's just some clarification. But to go back to my journey, but also just first to say thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here, and it's exciting to kind of dive into this first episode with you both, and met Ransu at a DeSci conference a week back. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and look forward to diving further into that.
That's great that you came. Yeah, exactly. So Monty was a speaker before me. We were both speaking at the Decentralized Science Conference in London. And that's where I got the idea to invite Monty over to our podcast.
And I'm sure we'll dive further into what is decentralized science, what is regenerative finance, what is all this stuff. But in terms of my journey, so I've always been a bit of a technologist and interested in building things and making things and thinking about the future, a futurist. And at the same time, sustainability has always been a core part of my thinking. My mum has worked in the sector for 50 odd years and written 20 books on the subject, and has been a bit of a pioneer in her day. And that's very much translated into from the beginning, having these big conversations and thinking, well, what the hell are we doing? We're heading towards absolute chaos, and no one seems to be doing anything about it in a meaningful way, or, there's some momentum, but just not enough. And so, I'd been interested in crypto from the beginning, from a sort of technological and philosophical point of view, as a technology and some of the ability to disrupt power structures and create parallel systems that, we can just build. But yeah, it wasn't really until a year and a half ago about that we started seeing some really interesting the beginnings of ReFi start to emerge. And it was then really when all this carbon came on chain with Toucan and Climate Protocol that suddenly we had millions and millions of carbon credits flowing on chain, and really this momentum started to pick up. And so I was in my final year of my 4-year integrated masters at Bristol. I was studying management with innovation, so management getting a very core overview of lots of business concepts, but really being able to take it in the direction that you're interested in. Of course, that was increasingly Web3 and tech and finance and economics and these kind of things. But also the innovation side of my degree as well was a new type of the course, and it basically meant that you could get together with all these different disciplines and start to form startups within the safety of a university. So 90+% of startups fail, but if you still get your degree out of it, you've learned a lot. And it was a brilliant course. And so, yeah, that was a really cool experience. And whilst I was doing that, I set up an organization, a startup called People Power, with some other people of friends on my course. And the kind of initial idea was the fact that, if you think of traditional investment platforms, they're clunky, they're quite boring, they're just like text, and, cumbersome, and also it's just lines of text of what your investments are. And we're thinking we could create a more visual, gamified experience here that appeals to the next generation, and at the same time start to really make this regenerative finance sector that was emerging, much more accessible. Of course, Web3 has many positives. We all know that the user experience can be sometimes frustrating, and so that was a real insight as well. And I know there's some foundational technology upgrades coming to make this whole experience better. But so that was some of the early days of my thinking around it. And I kind of started doing some consultancy with other companies as well. But really what I wanted to start with was just understanding what this ReFi sector was, and who was in it and what was going on. Because from where I started, I was like, okay, there's all this projects and excitement and energy, but like, how many projects are there? How much are they worth? Like, what are they each doing? What's the, and so this just didn't really exist. So I started to build a database myself to try and track this. And that's when I kind of got involved and saw ReFi DAO and what they were doing and what John was doing. And he has an amazing podcast that he runs and gets some of the top founders in the space to come on and share their insights. And at the same time, at ReFiDAO.com, we have a projects database. So we merged my database with his, as well as the wonderful folks at Impactor. We all merged our data together, came up with a taxonomy, and that data set is public, open source, available on our website. And to really start to scan the whole refi sector, we've now got over nearly 600 projects in that database, and also categorize them towards the primary impact area that they're affecting. So we think it's important to actually map the project to the actual impact that they're having. That's, at the end of the day, what refi is all about. And also some other metrics there. So that's been a large part of my role, and we've got some serious updates coming soon to that as well. But,
awesome.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear them. But always on the topic of, in terms of formalizing, let's just say, all the data that you have regarding the refi space, right? Which for the non-crypto native and non-refi native listeners, it stands for regenerative finance. I was quite curious as to the correlation/relationship between DAO, which stands for decentralized autonomous organization, and lent it to the taxonomy purpose of sort of providing an overview of the players and the overall structure of the refi space. Why a DAO specifically was so suitable to this end, let's just say.
Well, it's an interesting question, because ReFi DAO is not a conventional DAO at the moment in its structure, but ultimately it's where we're evolving towards. And you know, how I'd imagine it is it needs some foundational technology stack. At the moment, we've kind of bootstrapped ours on conventional Web3 tools, but we're in the process of partnering with Mycelia, who are a project on Gitcoin grants, who are helping to build some foundational knowledge graph tech. We're also going to, at some point, raise money, hopefully this year, and really go deep on building a full protocol layer, Web3 based protocol. And the idea is that we have a open source knowledge graph layer that's on chain. And we then have a reputation and identity system that allows people to add and make modifications to that data in a way that is decentralized and permissionless, but also maintains integrity and security. And if you, this is, I think, a really...
Right.
Sorry, what was
that? Ranzo?
I was saying that's Wikipedia. That's a very successful concept, right? On a background, when people can add the information and edit it. So that's a great.
Yeah, exactly. But I think an important mental model to understand this and to understand the kind of paradigm of blockchain is a classic example of how we're building at the moment. We're building on a database that, you know, is owned on a centralized server or is owned specifically by us. And in this case, we'd be uploading it to a decentralized database. And you can essentially think of it as just like a database with no database admin. So blockchain automates the database admin because it has this decentralized kind of structure. And the key that a lot.
Then what chain that runs on? Tell a little bit about that structure. Then when you put it on a decentralized format, all this information, that it's going to be on what blockchain? And
you're slightly catching up there, but in terms of, I think the question was what blockchain it was going to run. And I guess we haven't really decided that yet. It's not really important because it could run on any blockchain. I guess the important bit is that it's accessible and that the right actors can plug into it in the right way, and that it's not just a few people deciding exactly who gets on there, how the changes are made, but actually there's more of a group consensus made. And we can obviously work with experts and a group of us to kind of help to shape some of the fundamental methodologies that we use. Some of the work we're going on right now is actually thinking about what the exact schema is we use in the taxonomy. So how do we categorize impact, and how do we start to drill into these things a bit further in a way that makes sense. And the way we're kind of approaching that, we have a collaboration with the ReFi Rabbit Hole, which is a sort of working group that's popping up to try and drill into the question, really answer what is refi, put it into a really simple form and a one-pager document that's a summarization of a much longer document. But how we're approaching that is first to go, okay, well, what is ReFi? Well, obviously regeneration is a core part.
Tell us what is ReFi. That's now good. Tell us what is ReFi.
Good segue, yes. So my definition of ReFi is applying the principles of regeneration to create new systems, both economic systems and social systems. And so there's a bunch of work going on in that. And so, yeah, another mental model to think about it like is our current financial system and whole global economic system maximizes for one set of value, financial value, right? And it's going to become incredibly efficient at that. You know, it's a GDP replica, and line goes up, it's financial capital. That's what, even if the product itself is some crappy plastic, like something that nobody needs, if they can produce it cheap enough and enough people buy it, it creates more financial capital for a wealthy elite shareholder who's maybe invested in that. Well, great. But like, there's actually a much more diverse set of things that people value and that are valuable for the world. Living capital, you know, nature, the outdoors, both provides a suitable planet for us, and biodiversity has value and animals have value in themselves. We then have all these other forms of capital: spiritual capital, intellectual capital, material capital. And we should really be creating systems that create incentives for those forms of capital as well, and leveraging the same powerful incentive mechanisms that are replicating financial capital and using those to also replicate positive impact as well. And that's the fundamental design space.
On that one, by the way, you had a great slide on when last week on a conference that you were showing all these different kinds of capitals in a circle. So we should put a link to that one on our show notes.
Absolutely. I'll ask Monty to share the material, and when we post it, we'll definitely highlight that. But on the topic, right? Because last week, for example, we had what'd you say? Sorry, Monty.
It's called the 8 Forms of Capital, and Gregory Lauder, who was one of the original thinkers in ReFi, runs Regen Network, helped to co-create that with
awesome. Yeah, it's full of these interesting materials and sources of inspiration in terms of knowledge. But what I was saying is that last week we had Wolfram from Particular on, and he was sort of talking about from a concept standpoint, tokenization is awesome, right? Okay, you see something that is currently undermined, let's just say, and you need to assign a sort of value to it, right? So, for example, it could be, let's just say, for argument's sake, let's pick a given plot of land in the Republic of Congo, right? So you want to tokenize it, let's just say. So an NFT, if I own the NFT, I own, I don't know, the forest-related wealth and value attached to that specific plot of land, right? But of course, it's way more intricate than that, right? I think the way we've sort of constructed the current paradigm that governs capital markets, let's just say, it's very simplistic, right? It's expectation, equal output, equal whatever. But what I wanted to get to from your standpoint is, how do you think, because it's very interesting, and I think it's very admirable what you guys are trying to do, but it's a lot of work, it's ambitious, in terms of how do you think that in the process of understanding this journey, let's just say, of tokenization of real life assets and real life creatures, right? How do you think that ReFi DAO can facilitate the understanding for the general public to sort of immerse and sort of, you know, be...
So it's a good question about how ReFi DAO fits into that. And really, at the moment, we're more of a sort of ecosystem accelerator role.
Okay.
And so that involves, you know, it's very new, this space. There's been a surge of people and investment and interest, but, you know, it's very early days in this sector, and there needs to be better ways of coordination. So one of the first things that we did was create these founder circles, so that all these new founders who wanted to come into the space, instead of all trying to do their own thing and it's their thing, and then they realize there's loads of duplication of work, that's not very efficient. So actually create these circles of clusters of founders and brilliant entrepreneurs who come together and start to form concepts together in a more collaborative way. And it's really exciting to see how collaborative this ecosystem is, because everyone's in it for the shared mission, or a lot of us are. And we see this in the Gitcoin grants round that's live at the moment, and everyone's supporting each other, and we can really create connections with other projects as well, and actually become coordinated as a whole sector. So that is also part of the benefits of Web3 as well, is it makes it much easier to align incentives in that way, because the incentives are programmable, and we can actually not only create shared values where we're aligned with our values, but also create shared financial incentives as well. So I would say that is a key place for ReFi DAO, is really being the home and at the center of this whole movement, to really accelerate it and help it be achieve the full potential that I think it can achieve. So it's a pretty exciting position to be in, because I'm just here trying to boost everyone up who's true to the regenerative values that we want to see, and who are doing awesome work, and it's great because there are loads of people who are doing exactly that, and so it's really awesome to see that.
Yeah.
And
do you have some kind of voting system in your DAO, in your decentralized organization, or do you run it in a different way?
We do, but at the moment it's quite primitive, because again, like I mentioned, at the moment we've bootstrapped a kind of Web 2 system with some more prototyping type tools, and our current website, if you go there, refidao.com, you can submit votes. We've just implemented an account system so that you at least have to be logged in to submit votes, but still it's not like the most robust system in the world. And ultimately, it's more than the projects are more than just votes. So what we've now done is we reset the votes each week, so that actually it helps new projects to surface. It's such a fast moving space. We don't want just, a project to accumulate thousands of votes and then it just sit there. So we're really trying to get some more vitality in there to see some of these new projects emerge through. And if there's energy, community, excitement behind them, they should help rise to the top that week, and then we can promote them in our newsletter. But ultimately, that's one mechanism. And, voting has some merits, but there's also, it needs to be combined with a pluralism of different methods. And one of the methods I'm most excited about that we're just working on and just starting to develop with the ReFi rabbit hole is taking the classical regenerative frameworks. There are people who have been thinking about regeneration now almost for a decade as the next paradigm on from sustainability. And these are old-time professionals and academics who have developed awesome frameworks. And actually, the reason I'm leaving in 15 minutes or so is because John Fullerton, who developed these 8 principles for a regenerative economy, is giving a webinar, and he's got a really interesting framework there. But some of the other ones, there's Kate Raworth, Donut Economics. If you're familiar with that, she then has the principles of putting donut economics into practice. There's the regenerative principles of organizational design. There's all these, and there's a few other key frameworks as well. And so what we want to do is distill those, evaluate them, and then pull out some of the core themes and start to create our own regenerative framework for the ReFi sector, so that we can then start to evaluate the projects in the space according to a robust set of regenerative principles.
Yeah, you mentioned Gitcoin a few times, and Gitcoin is this quadratic funding platform for different types of projects. If I understood correctly what Gitcoin is, I haven't done that much research on it. But can you explain me, is ReFi DAO somehow involved in Gitcoin? Do you have something going on there?
Sure. So ReFi DAO has been the most funded project on Gitcoin, I believe, over the past few rounds of Gitcoin grants. And let me just explain a bit about to how the mechanism works. It's a really exciting innovation that come from Gitcoin. So basically, this mechanism, quadratic funding, is the idea that, so we have the layer 1 blockchain protocols, Polygon, ETH, no, Polygon's a bit of a layer 2, but anyway, you have these base layer blockchains, and they actually want to create an incentive for people to build on their ecosystem. So they're going to deploy funds to projects to build on those ecosystems, like a traditional grant funding thing. But how do you decide which projects get the grant funding? Well, the traditional mechanism that you might see NGOs or other kind of organizations operate is you have a centralized board of people who get all the applications in, they review them, and they then decide who gets the funding, right? It's a centralized model. It's got bottlenecks. It's slow. It's bureaucratic. It's open to manipulation, things like that. So what Gitcoin and this quadratic funding mechanism enables to have this matching pool. So there's a matching pool of funding that various blockchain protocols or individuals might have put forward. So, for example, in our case, it was to a climate solutions round building on. And you then have all of the projects submit their application. They then appear on the website. And then the whole ecosystem, so that in this case, the ReFi ecosystem and wider, everyone involved in that could go on there. And just like a shopping basket, they just add in the projects that they like, that they've been experienced with and think they're a really good project. I want to see more of them. They'd make their own donations. And then whoever gets the most amount of people donating to those projects, those are the projects that surface. So 100 people giving $10 to a project gets a higher amount of the matching pool than one person donating $100. So it's a democracy weighted system for allocating
more of a
funding.
social support. Yeah, exactly. It has a more widespread support than with the more people betting on it, so to say.
Yes.
Interesting. And so now then on this topic of you having 600 projects now on the ReFi DAO platform, and so walk us through a little bit on what is the trending now? What was originally, it was Regen Network and this type of things that were really kicked off tokens and everything that kicked off the ReFi movement, so to say, and us joining that as well. Then where are we now? Which kind of projects people are now proposing there on the platform? What do you see interesting?
Yeah, cool. So one of the ways to approach that question is, when you traditionally think of ReFi, you just think of carbon, right? And that was where it all kicked off. That's where the action came from. And carbon's hugely exciting. It's got the most maturity as a market right now because the global corporations and global markets are really switched on to actually executing those markets. And obviously Likvidi is a exciting kind of newcomer, or I believe a newcomer in this space. But also, I mean, what really excites me is seeing how the ReFi ecosystem has diversified to a broad range of values in that same spirit of seeing the different forms of capital. And so, yeah, I mean, a couple of the ones that excite me, I like Basin, Basin.global. They started out as a kind of an idea for regenerative real estate and sort of starting to invest in actual land around the world, and then regenerate it, and then using that regenerated land and the natural capital and the biodiversity and the carbon and all of the ecological ecosystem benefits as part of the valuation metrics for that as well. It's essentially, creating a new asset class, and it links to some of the ideas that actually are being explored at a global level as well. Like the US has explored putting its natural capital on its national balance sheet. If you think about what that means, means it's forests, it's clean rivers, it should be accounted for as part of a nation's. It's not just GDP. Natural capital is hugely important, and if we start to orientate our economies around valuing those effectively, then we create regeneration as a fundamental at the base layer because they're incentivized to do so, and it's like line goes up, nature goes up kind of stuff.
So on this one, by the way, the way that the carbon markets are now developing, this is probably going to be the first large-scale global accounting system for the nature that is happening now on this up-and-coming ITMO system, and that's going to be the first globally recognized on a government's level carbon trading system that will be exactly part of this accounting that you say that you can then put on your balance sheet.
By the way, Monty, ITMO stands for, and also for the listeners, Internationally Transfer Mitigation Outcomes. So it's essentially carbon credits with a blue tick next to them that are actually sort of verified.
So it's like Verra or gold standard, is it? It's like a different.
No, better. Essentially, it's as a result of bilateral agreements from between countries. That's how it'll start off, because it's all done and promoted under the UN umbrella. And that's basically to avoid proliferation at a project level within.
Really cool. So is that the only ones that Likvidi work with?
Yes. Well, it's going to be one of important things for us, because this one is now the reason why, what kind of a great thing that we are here together on is that the main registry that then Gold Standard and Verra and others will be plugged in. That will be the World Bank's Climate Warehouse's Climate Action Data Trust, and that's going to be running or is already running on Chia blockchain. And that's going to
Yes.
be the mothership meta registry that everybody else plugs in. And this enables the proper asset valuation between the countries even, and then selling the carbon assets, nature-based carbon assets across the world.
So that's going into mandatory markets, is that right?
No, but these markets will blend. They will start to blend. So now I think Colombia is now starting a pilot project where you can have then on a regulated market, so emissions market can now then have a 10% in there. Companies on regulated market can fill 10% with the voluntary carbon credits. So this is really interesting change, and that's why now the new bets, like kind of old information is old information now. So now the new bets are that the market will blend. That market blending will enable us really reach more offsetting, and that's now needed for staying within this 1.5 Celsius Paris Agreement level, and then also the prices of the voluntary carbon market, high quality, well verified, nature-based carbon credits will go up towards the pricing of the emissions market.
Yeah, 100%. That's what we need.
That's basically a big deal there.
Far too cheap and low quality at the moment, and it's definitely a problem with the early on-chain markets that we've seen. And so I'm excited to see.
Exactly. That is now trying to be addressed with these new systems.
Right. And I think as we're sort of cutting it short, one of the concluding questions that I wanted to ask you is that, of course, I want you guys to, because you're an enabler, you're a facilitator, which I think plays a huge role into the decentralization movement that crypto is trying to promote. Enablers are paramount. And of course, if you guys succeed, that means that the overall space is doing well. So I think everybody wants those economies of scale to be directed towards the ReFi space. Let's just say, for argument's sake, in, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, which in crypto terms means a lot, right? Because a lot unfolds at such an unprecedented rate. How do you envision that you guys will be able to sort of keep up with all the relevant market developments that pertain to each and single project, multiple correlations being built between projects? Like, the way I envision it, like, you either have to have thousands of employees, right, to be dedicated only to carbon markets, or I don't know, water carbon credits come on. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so how we're going to continue to, how we see this evolve potentially is if we have this decentralized knowledge graph, right? That's the core back-end infrastructure. You're right, we need to constantly populate, update, those kind of things. And so 2 things, one, we have ever-evolving AI tools that can help to scrape and actually gain really meaningful insights there. And 2, we have a global network of people online who can connect in to those ecosystems, provide their research, provide a constant kind of process. And we have 3, the incentive tools of the blockchain provides to create the incentives in order to do that. We can create token incentives, cleverly designed mechanisms to help facilitate that decentralized stewardship of the database.
So what is the deal then now with, you mentioned token system, are you coming up then with a token system, or do you already have it?
So we have a token system in mind, and there's been some slowing down in actually launching that because of there's the regulatory kind of system is very uncertain at the moment. But I think where we're starting is we've just announced our partnership with Common Stack, and if you go to Gitcoin, support us on Gitcoin grants with our partnership with Common Stack. And the idea there is that we're starting to create these local hubs where, say, for example, one of the first ones we've launched is ReFi Lisbon, and I believe the kickoff event is coming soon. And that's like a community of people actually on the ground who then come together to then form startups together, accelerate the ecosystem, and create new ventures with radical startup experiments, but also form the basis for on-the-ground regenerative communities to take some of these amazing global tools and global systems and actually implement their systems on the ground as well. And so we have these local hubs that then connect into these global systems as well. And the local hubs will each have their own governance token and governance system, and then they'll obviously connect into this wider organizational system as well, to really kind of align the global and the local, right? This kind of glocal, I guess. But
awesome.
So that's really exciting.
So then my next question here comes to probably the last question, because we have to soon stop here. But hey, you were talking at the conference in London. You were talking about this kind of eco village idea, or what was it? Solar punks, and the more the radical living, the ways of living.
ReFi villages.
Exactly. There we go. So this we cannot not have that as here in the end. You to explain that.
Definitely. Yeah, no, that's a really exciting concept. So it was a piece we wrote a week back to define this new concept of a ReFi village. And the idea is that there's the conventional eco-village movement in the 1960s that started. You can imagine that as almost kind of groups of basically hippies getting together and saying, let's live in a kind of commune kind of setup, but it's very isolated from the rest of the world and society. And it's like, fine, that has lots of positive environmental impacts, but it's not, the impact doesn't scale beyond that small cluster of people, and the majority of people aren't going to live in that way. We then see the kind of more evolved version of that, which is the regenerative village, and that's actually starting to utilize some of these powerful self-sustaining modern technologies we have to create a more a lifestyle that more people could get behind, and also more connected to the rest of the world and the rest of the economy. And now we have these ReFi villages emerging, which is taking the awesome stuff of the regenerative village and again connecting it to these global systems of Web3 to create better governance and coordination system for the create sort of village-based, land-based DAOs on the ground that then also connect into a much wider kind of networked system. And then you can ultimately imagine a whole network of these villages popping up all over the world that are localized but also connected with a shared digital infrastructure. And you can essentially imagine what Balaji defines in his book Network States is a network state, which is these kind of on the ground, like digital communities start to actually have territory on the ground and start to actually gain diplomatic recognition and basically are becoming a nation in themselves. So if we take this ReFi village, give it 10 years and see hundreds of these pop up all over the world, we have maybe the regen network state. And the most exciting
next generation timeshares.
Yes. And the coolest
I think one of the concluding points, I've been following The Last of Us, the series, where there's basically like based on the video game, and there's like basically an epidemic on a global scale. So people are forced to live in silos. And I think without the pandemic element, we can sort of move from the cities into segregated villages, and everybody will live in harmony. And I think let's end this Thursday night on a positive note. And Monty, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for being on. And I'm sure as there will be more pertinent and important developments on ReFi DAO, we'll have you on and we'll give you the opportunity to speak about those as well.
Yeah. Exactly. And the last words is that everything that we talked about on this, fast-paced 30-40 minutes now, everything can be then found on our show notes, so that you can look at hopefully the webinar that you're now joining in a few minutes. Hopefully you send us a link and people can watch that afterwards.
Yeah, cool. Thanks so much for having me, guys. All the best. Peace.
Thanks, Monty.
Thank you.
Bye.